firstly, is the feeling among the Serbian community, particularly where you are in Melbourne?
Well, look, this is an unfortunate situation that no one wanted to be a part of. And certainly if Novak had known that it was going to come to this, he wouldn't have boarded a flight to Melbourne and exposed himself to such a debacle. Novak believed that he had a valid visa and proper medical exemptions that were approved in Australia, and he confidently announced his departure for Melbourne. It appears that during his 24-hour flight to Melbourne, things took a dramatic turn for the worse, and his arrival became a political hot potato between the Victorian state government and the federal government, who both wanted to rid themselves of responsibility for his visa. Initially, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, announced that the medical exemption for Novak was a matter for the Victorian government, and hence the Victorian government approved the medical exemptions. It was responsible for his visa. Thus started a political tennis match between ScoMo and Brad Hazard of the Victorian government, who stated that visas are the responsibility of the federal government, which is true. This dirty political tennis match played out to the early hours of Thursday morning, where Novak had to wait 8 hours in immigration detention to find out his fate. And it appeared that ScoMo ultimately had no choice but to take responsibility for Novak's visa and then claim that rules are rules. I mean, this resulted in an unprecedented cancellation of a tennis player's visa at the doorstep of the Australian Open. Unfortunately, this is a bad look for the Australian government, and you would think that somewhere along the way proper inquiries would have been made earlier regarding Novak's suitability to come to Australia and to try to avoid this embarrassing situation for everyone.
Just on that point, Svetlana, I don't think anyone did disagree. This has become quite the political tennis match, but isn't it simply Novak got bad advice or even poor information?
Well, look, he was advised by Australian government initially, and that's what is confusing, because even back in Serbia, no one understands why that happens. Why that happened. Novak followed everything he possibly could to avoid any confusion or to be able to enter the country properly without any problems at all. And for him jumping on the plane, coming to Australia, and then on the Australian soil facing something like this is just very confusing and very disrespectful at the same time.
What damage do you think it's doing to the Australian Open, maybe the country as a whole, Svetlana, and even the relationship between Serbia and Australia?
Well, as you can imagine, everyone in Serbia is behind Novak, and there's an overriding sentiment that this is a political stunt. The fact that Djokovic's visa was issued by the federal government and his medical exemption approved by 2 independent medical panels in Australia makes the decision to deny him entry into Australia look indefensibly in the eyes of Serbia. I understand that representations were made at a high diplomatic level by Serbian government officials to allow Novak to stay in a house he rented in Melbourne under 24-hour guard, so that he could take proper care of his dietary and physical requirements. And all of these requests have been denied. It is hard to believe that Novak is treated like a high-risk individual, considering that his intention is only to play in a tennis tournament and then leave the country. The punishment that Novak is receiving does not appear proportionate to the circumstances he has found himself in. Any government would be concerned by such treatment of its citizens, and I hope this doesn't escalate further diplomatically and can be resolved relatively quickly for everyone's sake.
Oh, I think everyone would agree with you there, Svetlana. Just before we let you go, has anyone at the chamber heard from either Novak or his team? If so, what are they saying, or what are you doing to help support them?
Well, I've spoken to people in the Serbian community in Melbourne who are close to Novak's team, and the first thing that they would like me to convey is that Novak loves Australia and its people, and has shown this by donating to the Australian bushfire appeal and giving away $1 million from last year's Australian Open winnings to disadvantaged tennis players due to COVID. He is, of course, shocked at the turn of events and never envisaged that he could be at the center of such a debacle. He hopes that this unpleasant situation can be resolved as quickly as possible through a final binding decision that would provide certainty either way. He just doesn't want to be in a detention center any longer.